So first of all, my name is Steve Seaney. The session here is on Control Tower. So hopefully you're in the right session. I'm with a small consulting firm called Rego Consulting. We've got about 250 consultants worldwide. We span Australia, Europe, the UK, Canada, US, Latin America, a little bit in Latin America. Who here has heard of Control Tower? Cool. Who here uses it? I just want to figure out which. Okay, I can take this presentation a couple of different ways. I'm not using this to try to sell anything. We have a webinar on Tuesday that you can sign up for online, or you can sign up for at the table that we have, okay? Where two of our solutions architects are going to be hosting a webinar also on Control Tower. And if you're looking for something deep technically, you've got two people there who have deployed it dozens of times, okay? Using Terraform, using it manually. So just so, you know, this is a small enough group we can be kind of interactive, okay? So if what you want is demos, hands-on stuff, come to the thing on Tuesday. It's free, okay? We're not going to spam you any more than we would from here, right? And the people who are doing it, not only have they deployed it, but they've run for about 5 years a fairly complex 150 account SaaS solution that's built entirely out of Control Tower. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, come in and meeting those guys. Yes? What about Tuesday? So there is on Rego on Tuesday at, we've got a sign up at our table. And I've got the QR code here at the end of the presentation. But yeah, there's two of our solutions architects are going to run a more hands-on, in-depth session. We did that partially because I thought we originally had an hour here. We only have 25 minutes here. I'm not going to be able to do a demo in 25 minutes and rely on the internet. So that's a way you can log in and you can get in there and ask as many questions as you want for those guys. Okay. Sorry. So first of all, if you've all heard of, if I see you glazing over, I'll try to go faster. So first of all, why do we want to deal with multi-account governance, right? I'm hoping a lot of people already here are familiar with multi-account governance. Why do we want to do that? So first of all, we really encourage our customers, even if they're a small startup and they've only got a couple $100 worth of spend, to begin to position themselves to have a multi-account organization if they think they're going to grow at all, right? And the reason for that is it lets you separate out security, right, by account. It lets you separate out workloads and cost tracking, okay? So we really encourage people to leverage organizations and multi-account, right? It can be a little more expensive, but it should be pretty insignificantly different if you're careful, okay? If you're on business support, right, if you're familiar with that, they charge per account, right? So just don't put business support on your dev accounts, right? Don't quote me on it with AWS, but put business support on your production accounts if you're a greenfield, you know, startup, just getting started, right? But be really careful. Governance challenges at scale. If you start out with an organization of accounts and you grow it, as you scale, it becomes trivial, right? If you come to, you know, later and say, hey, I really need to separate out my prod and my dev accounts because I'm going through a SOC audit or some sort of an audit, right? But now you got the question of, you got all your dev accounts and your billing account, and you got to separate out dev, and your billing is in one account and your development's in another account, and it just gets messy. So we encourage our clients to think about that from the beginning. The other thing is it lets you separate out. What Control Tower allows you to do is it lets you automate this process now that you've got multiple accounts. So what is Control Tower? A lot of people I think everybody here is kind of familiar with Control Tower, right? Anybody here not heard of it? Not familiar with it? Okay, so what Control Tower lets you do, okay, is it lets you automate managing those multiple accounts. Full stop. Managing and governing and deploying those multiple accounts, right? It has the concept of a landing zone, which you start out with, guardrails, which they now call controls. I'm kind of showing my age. I like guardrails better than controls, but AWS now calls them controls. And you can create your new accounts within that organization using something called Account Factory. And as AWS has grown over the last few years, they've added more and more capability to Account Factory. If you used it like 4 years ago, it was horrible. It took 2 or 3 hours to create an account, right? Now it'll do multiple accounts. And then you can go in and you can pull a configuration and you can say, this is this type of an account. I've got these different types of accounts that I've set up, okay, from kind of a menu of different accounts types you can set up, and you can kind of set that up and automatically set that up. It also ensures that as your development accounts grow, right, you can make sure people are following best practices from the beginning. The value you get out of that, right, is rapid standardization from the beginning, all right? Centralized governance and compliance, so you get a view of all your accounts, and if they're still being governed like you thought, or if somehow, we had this happen with a real customer. We had a customer who's really well organized. Somehow they didn't have Control Tower, somehow they deployed a development account that didn't have MFA en route, right? And I don't know if anybody here has experienced that. We lost about $300,000 because we acquired a company that didn't have MFA en route, right? It was an acquisition. They got stung by a bogus email, changed their password, gave it away in the course of 48 hours. A company went in, a hacking group went in and used it for bit mining, and that, by the time we got the call from AWS that we had a problem, they had gone through $300,000 worth of billing in different regions around the world. So that is one of the reasons why we make sure that all of our clients really think about using Control Tower is that use case alone, because now all of your accounts are controlled and governed, and you have visibility before that kind of thing happens. With Control Tower, and once you get your accounts at an organization, it's much more cost-effective to manage, because you're not trying to manage. I can't even imagine with an organization, we have 120, 100 to 150 accounts in our ISV that we manage, okay? Some of our clients have 60 or 70 accounts commonly. I can't even imagine managing that manually, right? If you got 60 or 70 accounts floating out there in space and you're trying to figure out what the constraints are on each account, you'd be lost. It's scalable for growth. You add an account, you add it to an OU. We'll show you a little bit about that in a few minutes. It applies the constraints and the rules that you want to have on that, and you get visibility from monitoring. Touched on a lot of this right now. A lot of the benefits I've talked about here. So let's just talk about what Control Tower looks like, right? In a momentous organization, which we run into, so we're an ISV, we're also a solutions provider. So not only we're an ISV, we're also a consulting firm. So we're kind of unique. So the people on my team and myself, right? I deployed the first version of Control Tower that we did at Rego, right? So the people on our team that do this and help clients with this are pretty passionate about this. So a single account structure, you've got prod and non-prod in the same account. You're running all of your security systems in the same account, all of your security. You're keeping your data buckets in the same account, right? Your logging buckets. And I don't know how you would get through a SOC audit or any type of a quality audit with that type of a setup. Maybe you could, but at best you'd have a lot of questions. When you go to Control Tower, what you have is you've separated now your different functions to different accounts. So the first thing we're going to have is you use service catalog to define the different accounts you have. When you deploy an account, you can use service catalog to say this is a dev account or this is a prod account. That can deploy certain services and constrain you. A lot of this overlaps with organizations. If you guys are on your toes, you can easily use IAM Identity Center to control your logging into all of your accounts. So what we encourage our clients to do is when they deploy Control Tower in organizations now, they use AWS IAM Identity Center, right? They tie that with their SSO. If you're going through an audit now, you don't have to have a separate governance mechanism for your AWS accounts from the rest of your business, which may be run by Office 365 or another SSO provider. Or AWS organizations governs your accounts, right? Or pulls your accounts together, right? With Control Tower, one of the big advantages for governance is it's going to set up accounts that are just, there's a kind of a security administration account and there's a logging account. And it will send config information and core logs to the logging account, right? Nobody can touch them. It's very secure, right? You have to bend over backwards to get into them. Again, has anybody been through a SOC audit before? So that to me is key. That will take care of a number of your SOC audit questions because they'll say, what do you log, right? You can show them what you log. How can you prove that nobody else can get into it? And there's SCPs, which are security limitations on that account that prevent anybody else from changing it. If you want to get access to that data, you share it to another account, read-only basis, right? You can then have different organizational units of accounts. So you can have like an infrastructure OU. Sometimes I call that the support OU. That's where people go in to run Lambda functions and run patching and stuff like that across your account. You can have workloads, so production workloads. You can have a sandbox OU. You can give your development team administration access to the sandbox OU, and you can constrain them so that they don't have access in the workloads OU. It's easy to do. Does that make sense? Any questions? Are you guys finding this useful? Is this like mom and pop? Okay. This is a similar overlap for the base architecture. It's a slightly different view, okay? This is actually this is an example of how we do it with our customers normally, okay? So the first one is more generic. We've got the security OU. That's got a log architect and an audit account, which I mentioned, okay? The great thing here is you can give your security team access to the audit account, or you can use it what AWS intended it to be, which is your auditors have access to that account. If you have third-party auditors that go in and actually want to be able to log in and investigate your system, you can give them this access to an audit account and then constrain their ability to get to the data and resources that they need, right? The log archive account is protected. Nobody should ever even log into it unless it's just to share the S3 buckets the logs are stored in or the logs themselves with another account, all right? Sandbox, somebody needs a sandbox, you can set up a sandbox account. You can maybe put cost limitations on it, but maybe give them access to every freaking AI system that AWS has, right? They want to experiment AI, you give them their own account, you talk to them a little bit about what they want, and you're like, okay, this guy's gonna do some damage. So we're gonna use AWS budgets to put a limit on that freaking account so that when they spend over $1,000, right, it's gonna shut off their AI services that they're using, right? Production accounts, we're gonna lock those down, right? People won't be able to log into them. Our developers won't be able to get into the production account. Maybe on release weekend, we'll give them access to that account, right? Non-production accounts, okay? This is my favorite, and this I confuse sometimes with this, okay, with the audit account, right? Ideally, the audit account is only for your auditors, but sometimes if your auditors don't need that, you'll set up your security service like Security Hub and stuff like that from this account, okay? And this is your shared services. We always have a support account. If you're gonna have a separate account for your security services, you can set it up here, okay? And then this is a great trick. If you suspend an account or you suspend an OU, when you close an account, you have to leave it open for a while for billing purposes, but you want to turn it off. So what you can do is you can create a suspended OU. If it's a production account, you turn it off, disable everything, move it over here. The suspended OU has all the rights turned off, so nobody else can log into it. Just move it over to another OU. Are people here familiar with OUs? Okay, all right. So an OU you can apply a set of controls to or guardrails to is one way to think of it, okay, or SCPs. And in Control Tower, it lets you easily define what types of controls you have here. Another way that I like to do it, this is what we did for our own ISV, is once we get to the production OUs, we have a production OU for the US, production OU for Canada, production OU for Europe, a production OU for the UK, production OU for Australia. If you think you're gonna go global, I would strongly recommend that you do that. You don't have to do that. You can do that with regions, theoretically, but let's suppose you launch and you're in Europe and GDPR comes out with some crazy requirement, right? That you think is crazy. Well, now it's in a different OU. You can lock that thing down and you can protect it. Let's suppose in Australia they come out with a rule that says they only want people in Australia to have access to certain types of Australian data. Well, if it's in its own OU, now you can pretty much use Control Tower and to help lock down that account in an auditable fashion. So a lot of what this is making it so you can prove to your auditors that you're following these rules. We've talked a little bit about guardrails, okay? They now call them controls. I should have corrected the slide, but I still think of guardrails. So first of all, there's different types. There's preventative guardrails, which stop you from doing stuff, okay? So those are the harsh ones. And there's detective. And there's a third one now too. I still think they fit best in those buckets. There's like one called proactive. But some prevent you from doing something, right? And some are detectives. They tell you. So for instance, a good preventative guardrail is whenever we stand up an account, right, we immediately go in and we set a preventative guardrail that says anybody who logs in as root has no rights. It's the most annoying guardrail in the world if you hit it. You log in as root, you don't have access, right? You got to go back to the master account, log into Control Tower, find the guardrail, drop the guardrail. You're effectively dropping an SCP, okay? So we really recommend that, you know. Examples for types of guardrails you've got. There's some for logging guardrails. You know, maybe you want to make sure that you're logging all of your certain types of networking events, okay? And again, the logging with Control Tower is going to be set up to shift everything over to your logging account. You might have IAM restrictions, like I mentioned, the SCP on root. They're applied generally at the OU level or possibly the account level, depending on the type of guard rule they are, okay? And it gives you a way to see central violations, okay? The one thing I'll just quote me on it, one thing I'm not crazy about AWS is I love Security Hub. I think it's, after Control Tower, probably my second favorite AWS governance service, right? And Control Tower is great too. These two things overlap, right? So you just have to be aware of that. It's okay that they overlap. AWS is working on integrating them more. So definitely, we highly recommend that you deploy Security Hub and Control Tower, but just realize that there's some overlap here. So we're not going to do a demo here, but seriously, join Vipin and Niraj and myself on Tuesday. Come by. It's not just a cheap way to get your codes. We won't spam you too much. So Tuesday, if you drop by the table, we're having a webinar with two of our principal architects on Tuesday, where they can go through and do hands-on stuff and do demos here. So, and they're both from Pune, but we've worked together for 12 years. They're great. English is perfect. Yes, but yeah. On Tuesday, feel free to join us. As far as deployments methods, right? How you can deploy Control Tower, right? First of all, there's the easy way. That's what I would do myself, right? I'm a solutions architect, but I'm not a developer, right? And you can do it through the UI. And you can take an account and you can do it through the UI and you can deploy it, and it works really well. And if you're new and you do that, the one question you would have is, I've got an existing account. Do I want to make that my master account in my organization? Or do I want to create a new master account and create Control Tower and pull mine into that master organization, right? And that really, if you can do it the second way that I said, where you create a new master account and then fold yours in, that's really the best way to do it. It's best not to run production nodes or production loads in your master production account. AWS, that's for organization in general. AWS is trying to get you away from that, okay? So try to get your master account so that nobody goes into it except your top DevOps people, okay? The people you trust the most, not your accountant, not your finance people, certainly not marketing, okay? Try to keep that separate. So consider it. But you can also do it through the CDK or through Terraform. I have not done it through Terraform, my team has. I've messed with the CDK, but if you want questions like that, come Tuesday, okay? If you're capable of doing it through the CDK, I would always give that some thought. Doing as much as you can with infrastructure and code in AWS makes you more scalable, okay? So there's also, we touch on it a little bit later, but there's also a custom version of Control Tower that you can deploy if you really want some custom features. Lifecycle management, once you deploy Control Tower, remember, once or twice a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, AWS will update it. And you just need to kind of stay on top of it. If you're a greenfield company, small company, mid-sized company, you're not going to have like a production Control Tower and a non-production Control Tower, which very few people have. Just don't be on the bleeding edge. AWS has been unbelievably responsive when we've hit Control Tower issues, okay? It's a great group. They respond really fast. You just don't want to be on the bleeding edge if you're changing a Control Tower organization and you've got production loads in there, okay? So just realize you're going to and try to maintain your updates. Yeah, I'm watching time. Account Factory is how you build accounts. Okay, so once you're in Control Tower, somebody comes to you and they know account, use a place in there called Account Factory. It's fairly straightforward, okay? But it'll build and deploy, it'll tag them, it'll set up encryption. You can add automation to it. And then the way that we recommend when you go to Control Tower is there's a set of mandatory guardrails. Start with those. Don't deploy any guardrails. So the first thing is just get your accounts organized, deploy Control Tower. That's going to deploy the mandatory guardrails. Now you can develop a guardrail or control strategy and begin to add them by OU. Okay? When you begin to do that, if you're comfortable with doing it with code, there's lots of libraries out there. If anybody's interested, email me and we can give you some of the tricks that we use. We'll just give them away. But once you begin to add, we had over 100 guardrails on every OU, right? So you want a view that you can see, are they all still there? Did we drop any by mistake? Things like that. So touched on a lot of these. I'm just watching time. Enhanced visibility. I think we've touched on everything here. As far as, I just mentioned the different methods. So again, out of the box, fast, governments, fewer misconceptions. If you've only got a couple of accounts, you can do it out of the box, okay? We also had a pretty complex client that has over 60 accounts that they deployed. Now, they're a very knowledgeable client. They deployed Control Tower across their OU. We helped them. We burnt a total of 8 hours of consulting helping them, right? So one thing I want companies to walk away from here is this should not be a big, scary thing that you have to reach out to consulting for, okay? As consultants, again, 60 OUs, truly global client, or 60 accounts, truly global client, multiple OUs. They're an old client. Older the client, the more messy they are usually, right? They got old stuff that's changed. So if you're complex, if you're an enterprise client, you may have to use the custom Control Tower, okay? And again, that's a bigger step, but again, stand up your master accounts, stand up your core accounts, and then fold your new accounts in. And then we'll talk more about kind of the legacy and SSO on Tuesday when we'll go more in detail. The key lessons learned are nested OUs. So you could have like one OU below another OU. If you can avoid that, try to avoid nesting OUs. Just keep your organization as flat as possible. If you have if you need to customize a guardrail for some reason, you can do that. It's better that you take a guardrail and customize it and apply it. What other people will do is we've seen people go in and they create a custom SCP and deploy that outside of Control Tower, right? So if you can, deploy everything you can as a guardrail within Control Tower, once you're up and running. Make sure you use Account Factory to enroll accounts. It'd be crazy not to be honest. It's so much easier once you use it the first time. There are sets of Lambda functions you can use for auto remediation, okay? AWS Security Hub has something that very few people know about called ASR. It's Automated Security Hub Remediation Tool. If you're an AWS customer, you're not familiar with it, go write it down and look it up. What it does is once you deploy Security Hub, it says if you see an issue, right, it'll automatically address that issue. And when you go to be audited later and the auditor says, how do you know that, I'm trying to think of an event that we handle with ASR, but how do you know when this event occurred that you handled it? Well, you can use ASR. It trivially will go in, resolve the issue, log the fact that it was spotted and logged. So, and that uses Lambda. And then there are partner tools that you can use. Usually you don't have to. I know we're getting close to time here. Why don't we just do this? If anybody, you can sign up. This takes you to our session, okay? Or just drop by the table. And we've got it also up there. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to jump on. They know a lot more than I do, so.